Where are we here? The February 1st special meeting of the West Haven ARPA Committee will now come to order. I'm going to ask everyone to state the name for the record. Ken Carney.
Neil Cavallaro.
Dwight Knowles.
Ken Ferris.
Gary Porto.
Mike Glass.
Chris Forrester.
Rohan Smith.
Iris Diaz.
Nancy Rossi.
Everyone has a copy of the agenda in front of them. Any objections to the agenda? Anyone? Okay, agenda stands. Next, we move on to the organizational meeting minutes from the January 25th meeting. I'm going to ask Dwight to briefly go over them.
Tuesday, January 25th. Call to order at 4 p.m. by Nancy Rossi, Mayor of West Haven. Pledge of Allegiance, swearing in committee members Patty Horvath. In attendance, Tricia Horvath. Committee members Ken Carney, Chris Bernstein, Iris Diaz, Ken Ferris, Mike Glass, Neil Cavallaro, Rohan Smith, myself, and Gary. Mayor Rossi remarks. Organizational of ARPA Committee. Nomination for Secretary. Nominated Dwight Knowles. Motion Mike Glass, second. Gary Porto. No discussion, approved. Nomination of Vice Chair. Mike Glass. Motion to approve. Neil Cavallaro, second. Dwight Knowles. No discussion, approved unanimously. Nomination for Chairman. Ken Carney. Motion. Neil Cavallaro, second. Mike Glass. No discussion, approved. Regular meeting minutes, schedule for 2022. It's there. A motion to approve meeting. Dwight Knowles, second. Mike Glass. Iris Diaz and Norman Smith, 6 p.m. would be a conflict with other commitments. Motion to change meeting to 5:45. Neil Cavallaro, approved, second. Dwight Knowles, no discussion, approved.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the January 25th organizational meeting of the ARPA Committee?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have Chairman's report. So everyone here knows that the mayor is working on a list of projects for the ARPA funds. She will send those to the council. The council will look at them and either approve or change, whatever happens. That is probably going to happen in the next couple months. In the meantime, my sense is we're probably going to need an architect. We're probably going to need to talk about a homeless shelter. Those things may come out of this, so I figure we get a head start, so when the word comes down that says, hey, ARPA Committee, these are the next projects we want you to work on, we'll be prepared, okay? And that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. So with that, I have with us tonight Reverend Benita Grubbs. She's the Executive Director of CCA in New Haven. I had the opportunity to work with Benita at her homeless shelter that she runs. And I got to tell you, it is state-of-the-art, it is run professionally, and it's something to be proud of. And I was proud to work there. So I asked Reverend Benita Grubbs to come tonight and tell us what she does, and everybody in this committee will have an opportunity to ask her questions. What is involved with a homeless shelter? What are the day-to-day things that happen? How do you set it up? What are the costs? And I thought that would be valuable information for the council, the mayor, and this committee. So with that, I'm going to introduce Reverend Benita Grubbs. Thanks for being here.
So, is it okay to stand right
Yeah, of
here?
course, yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, when Ken speaks, I listen. And he called me the other day to talk with me about the hospital that's coming, oh, okay, now I really have to speak. So he called me because of the work that we had done together in the renovation of our homeless shelter. We have been providing services in New Haven on Davenport Avenue and on Sylvan Avenue in New Haven for many, many years, starting in 1966-67, when we were providing services to one family that was left homeless as a result of a fire. So we've had many years of experience, half a century of experience over time in really trying to provide services. Essentially, what we want to do is to keep the family together, to promote family stability, to work with the head of household or the heads of household around employment, around training, around education, to connect the children to the various services that we might be able to provide, We don't have case managers. We call them family coaches because we understand that it's a participatory process, to be able to encourage and really to be able to support the families who are there. We have 17 apartments at 3 locations, and it's apartment style, so it's a normalized environment. It's not like a big room. It's not some alcove somewhere, and there's some shelters certainly across the country that have that kind of setup. But we want to be able to create a sense of stability and to really provide the family, all of its members, that opportunity to have stability. We have single heads of household, we have 2-parent families, we have large families, we have small families. And so when a family moves into a fully furnished apartment, and the family meets with, as I said, with that family coach through the duration of the time. And then our efforts are really trying to connect the heads of household with both employment opportunities as well as child and family services. It is really a home away from home. We've had some challenges since the pandemic arrived around providing that kind of housing, not because of what it is that we are doing in the area of providing services, but rather really trying to help individuals who have had a loss in income, who've had all kinds of stress in their lives as a result of the pandemic. And so we have actually had folks stay longer in our shelter. We recently celebrated 7 families that have moved to permanent housing, and that's a real sense of accomplishment for us. And those, just as those apartments are now being renovated, they will be occupied by families because there's no end, unfortunately, in the times in which we live, of families who are in dire straits, families who need a lift, families that need some stability and a sense of future and purpose. And so we have one family, in fact, that stayed about 100 days, which is more than 100 days, actually a whole year. And the reason is a systemic one, that the employment opportunities and economic opportunities were not there for that particular family. The good news is that there was a rental subsidy that was available to be able to move that family along. One last thing I'll say, and I certainly can answer any questions that you might have, but I think the thing that I know also is that we are part of a group that's called the Coordinated Access Network. It is a regional construct where all of the shelters in the New Haven area and certainly throughout the state of Connecticut work together to be able to make sure that those resources are available. So CCA is actually doing that, and we're having a legislative breakfast actually tomorrow to talk about what resources that we need in order not just to provide shelter, as important as that is, but also to create that pathway to stability of the family, stability of the individual, and hopefully some opportunities to become gainfully employed. And we'll see how that goes because the legislative session has not taken off yet, but the reality is that there are some challenges that are ahead, economically speaking, for these families. The last thing I'll say is this, that in addition to the work that we do in shelter, that we also have a motel assistance program because we know that there just are individuals who just can't make it into the system, and the system is really full of other families, many other families and individuals, and the resources aren't there. So I applaud you and applaud Ken in particular because the resources are really very much needed. And the resources can benefit families so that there isn't that destabilizing kind of environment. Final thing. Because we know that the solution to homelessness is not just having a permanent or temporary apartment or a permanent apartment, the economic development is part of what it is, and financial literacy and those kinds of things are important for us to be able to do. So we are actually starting a program in the New Hallville section of New Haven that's called A New Hope, Housing Opportunities, Purpose, and Expectations, as a way of trying to really help people to skill up so that they can get the employment. So it's not just a shelter. It's really taking the whole family in all of the ways in which we can to be able to leave them, as I sometimes say, better off than the way we found them, as long as their participation is there in place to be able to do that. I'll stop because I don't think that you wanted to have a long,
No, we appreciate it.
much longer than
We have
what
a lot
I
of
just
questions
shared.
for you, so we're going to open up to
I
questions.
can pause for questions.
Go ahead, anybody? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. This is interesting, and it's great that we're gonna get some more information on it. With the facilities now, it's not just one building. It's
It's 3 buildings.
And does the CCA, do you own those buildings?
Yes. Well, 2 of the buildings we own, one of them we lease, well, it's on a long-term lease from the city of New Haven. It's a long-term type situation that came as a result of a lawsuit. And so the city gave that building over to be able to provide sheltering for families at our homes. But for all intents and purposes, we own it, we renovate it. Ken's work included the renovation of that building, even though it's owned by the city of New Haven.
Now, is there a process for people to become eligible, or is it something where if somebody really needs that service, they can just show up?
No, I mentioned the coordinated access network.
Mhm.
And what that's designed to do throughout the state of Connecticut is to afford individuals and families the opportunity to have an assessment before sheltering, to find a location that might be appropriate for the need and meeting the needs that are there. For example, in our shelter, we can take larger size families because we have 3-bedroom apartments, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bedrooms and an efficiency. There are other shelters that have similar or different configurations, and so the intake into the shelter is based on the size of the family or the number of individuals who are involved and in need of sheltering. And so that's just the way that we want to and have done the work with families for a long time. And again, some have alcoves, some have large rooms. It all depends upon the circumstances and the population. And I'll add one last thing, that with COVID, all of us have had to make adjustments in how we actually configure our physical spaces.
One last question,
Sure.
then I'll pass it. What kind of staff does it require for those facilities, to keep them going?
And again, in our case, and I don't know the numbers of other shelters, but I will say this, that at each one of the sites, there's a site on Davenport Avenue with the 2 buildings, there's a site on Sylvan Avenue with the 1 building, and we have a building superintendent on site. They work during the day, and then they make sure that there is safety and security, and if there's an emergency, that individual would be able to make the call to various staff members so that there could be some remedy. It's like what you have in a regular apartment. You have a building super who takes care of stuff after hours and emergencies.
They live there, Mike.
Yeah,
live on
they're
site.
on site.
do,
They
okay.
have their own apartment on
Yeah.
site. So in addition to the 17 apartments, there's the 2 apartments for the building supers.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Chris?
If I may, Reverend Gibson, thanks for coming. I think you do great work.
Sure.
What's your source or sources of funding, and what's your annual budget?
We have a budget of about $1.7 million, and there are a range of services that we provide. Other than sheltering, we have neighborhood food pantry, a fuel assistance program. We have child and family services at the building that is adjacent to our shelter, because what we also want to be able to do is not just to house them, but really to take a look at how we can really promote independence. Another acronym, it's called the Uri Center, and it's accessing resources for independent skill building and employment. And so the central letter is I, and the central thing that we're trying to promote is family independence, however that takes shapes in partnership with the family. So the 1.7 includes some of that work, but it also includes the shelter in the neighborhood services and some of the advocacy that we do. In terms of staffing, I mentioned earlier that we have family coaches rather than case managers. And so there are 2 family coaches. We're actually in a hiring process at the moment to be able to work with the families, talk with the families, provide support to the families, direct them to the places where they say they want to go. And so there is that kind of relationship that the family coach has with the family over the course. And it's about even. So if there's 17 families, then one family would get perhaps 7, and then there would be 10, depending upon the family size. But it's a collaborative, it has been a collaborative relationship between the 2 family coaches who are assigned families to work with. And again, it depends on family size as to how many families each one of the family coaches get. So did I answer your question?
I think funding, right?
The one part is...
Oh, the funding, sorry.
funded by
Sorry,
the
we
city or
get funds,
grants?
we get funds from the Department of Housing.
Mhm.
And most, if not all, of the shelters in the state of Connecticut receive those funds. And as this is the case with us, we have other services that we get funding for in other places. And I'll give you one example. I mentioned the Motel Assistance Program, and that's for individuals where there's no shelter, it's in the evening, we need to get family in a safe space. And so we will, and we have done for years, provided the family with a space until a shelter space is open. So we get those resources from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program through the United Way and other sources where we can secure them. But the main source of funding is from the Department of Housing at the state level.
I'm going to, Iris, do you have any questions? I know you're on a short schedule tonight.
No, actually, she answered.
Oh, okay, good. Gary, you have a question? Go ahead.
First question. Are you a registered 501c3?
Yes. Since
Newly
1967.
registered or been registered?
I'm sorry?
Are you newly registered or have you been registered as a
We have
501?
been registered since 1967.
Okay. How many people are going to be employed?
Well, again, it depends, in your case, it depends on the size of the family, but we have a total, on the shelter side of the fence, eight individuals who are who are providing care or receiving
Yeah, there's-
compensation.
Gary,
I tell you right now, there's definitely a need for displaced families during the pandemic.
Yep.
Second of all, it'd be a great relief to our neighboring city who takes on the suburban impact on everything just about and nonprofit. We lack a little, we always have, and I think we can meet some of the stuff that'll satisfy the region as a whole by doing this. But I'm going to tell you something right now. The process that we're using is going to be the same process that is CBG is done. Make a recommendation to the city council and make a presentation. What we are lacking right now, and I insist that there be a full application placed in front of me.
So Gary, she's not here to apply tonight.
Oh, no, no,
She's just
no.
describing
No, no.
what she does at Haven.
No,
It would have been much easier with a full application.
There's no application.
yeah, what Ken did was to,
Yeah.
yeah, what Ken did was to
Right.
ask me to describe what our programming is.
I just-
Our history is.
I am convinced that the need is especially needed.
And
Thank
I'll
you.
say one thing, that's what you triggered, which is, I mentioned the Coordinated Access Network. And the reason why I mentioned that is because it is not just a New Haven-based entity, it really is a region-based entity. So all of the shelter providers work together to accomplish the goal of ending homelessness at the individual level and certainly at the programmatic and systems level. And so not really saying too terribly much, but I did talk with the director of the Coordinated Access Network to mention that I was going to be sharing what it is that we do this evening. And I know that the individuals within the United Way of New Haven really do support and really do think that there is an important role to play regionally in the provision of services to families that are homeless.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Neil.
Well, thank you, Robert, for coming tonight. From my perspective as the superintendent of schools, I could see this as a really positive because it would keep the families in West Haven. As you probably deal with, there are so many that you have to transport. We're responsible for transporting back and forth to other communities because families have been displaced. So to keep them within West Haven would be a real positive. And, not only from a financial point of view, because it would save us a few dollars, but I think just to keep them in the community and connected and involved with some continuity in a time when their lives are so disrupted, I think would really assist them and be a big help.
Anyone who is closer to the place where they grew up is better off if there's a supportive environment out of which they've come. There are challenges, obviously, in any family system, but what I can say to you is that if there's anything that I can do to support your efforts, this is not about getting a grant, this is not about trying to
Oh, I
get any
understand.
funds to fill our coffers. This is really about, very basically, trying to provide safety out of the elements, and particularly this time of the year. We have a Motel Assistance Program that is overloaded with individuals who can't find a place to go. And so the compassion around trying to give people, children and parents, and individuals as well, that safety out of the cold, that safe space to be able to feel as if they can catch their breath, is critical to them taking the next step in their life, whatever that next step might be. And the counselor type, you know something about counselor type people, will encourage, will push, will cajole, suggest, and maybe even have the opportunity to say, you're headed in the right direction, keep at it. So the pep talk is also part of the process because people get discouraged along the way.
Excellent. Anybody else? Go ahead, Mike.
Just one follow-up, and again, do you partner with any social service agencies?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And put them in contact with these different agencies?
Oh, yeah.
To make sure that they're getting the entire service?
Well, if one thinks about it, and certainly you're pushing me to do so, is that when we look at the family that we serve, or the families that we serve, we do an assessment at the beginning of the family stay to really determine what the need is and what services we can connect that family with. Sometimes it's education. We have a relationship with the City of New Haven and the Board of Education. We have connections with employers. I serve on the board as an example of the Regional Workforce Alliance because what we understand is it's not just one thing that's going to make the difference in a family. It's going to be a couple of things that will make the difference, pulled together, cobbled together, knitted together, however you want to describe it, to be able to then say, okay, this family is in good shape. And even because we do our work in a person-centered way, when a family comes back and asks for help, we don't turn them away because we know that they trust us to be able to say, this is what's happened, can you help me? And all of the time, that happens because the staff members have a high degree of compassion and care for the folks served. And I think that's critical to any shelter, is to make sure that the work is person-centered and focused on results.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Mary, you have any questions?
No, but thank you. I want to thank you very, very much for coming, because it is something that, you know, I do agree with the superintendent, there's a need, and everyone else who has spoken here, so thank you again, very, very much.
Yeah, and the offer was earnest. I mean, Ken has my cell phone number and my email address. And so, you know, this is really about, for us, an opportunity to really provide stability for families. So when I said what I did about if you need some support, this is not about trying to get additional funds in CCA's coffers. It's about serving folks and making sure that families are stable. And particularly when they are vulnerable, that's exactly the time when they need that hand up and hand out. So thank you for the opportunity to share. And, you know, if I don't get the phone call, I'll be busy doing whatever at CCA. If I do get the call, then I'm certainly willing to be of support to you as you look at what you can do as a town, city, to be able to provide that kind of support and care as a way of what I described earlier as of promoting independence and helping children grow up to be healthy adults.
Outstanding. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure seeing you tonight, and thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the RFQ. Pass it down for me. You want copies, sir? You sure? Good night, thank you. Okay, so I can only imagine that at some point when final decisions are made, there'll be some brick and mortar in this process. And what I see happening out there is as towns and cities gear up to spend their money, the pool of architects gets more and more shallow. I would like the opportunity to put out an RFQ, which doesn't really cost us anything, just to get an architect on deck So if we do have a brick and mortar project that comes to us, we can pull the trigger rather quickly instead of going through a couple months of advertising, interviewing, selection process, and competing against all these other towns and cities for these architectural services. So with that, I threw this together. I put in here just about everything that the money could be spent on from a brick and mortar standpoint. And I'd like your comments on it. But basically, it would be an architectural firm that is experienced, that has the MEPs in-house. They can do their own engineering, so they don't have to go outside. Firms that had experience in small and large jobs, have some experience with how ARPA funds are supposed to be spent. And I sort of condensed all of this into this document. So, I could send you home with this, and you could look it over and make suggestions. You could email me or could bring it up in the next meeting. But this is what I had in mind going forward, so we had an architect ready to pull the trigger if we need one. Yes, sir.
Ken, real quick, do you envision us having more than one design firm if we have multiple projects going at once, or are you looking at a firm that could handle multiple projects?
Well, I think that the best value for the city is one firm, but I think by putting this out to bid, you're going to get a lot of responses, and at that point, we could pivot and say, these are the three best guys, let's, talk to these guys. So you don't have to use one firm, but my experience is when we do multiple projects with one firm, we get a much better deal than if we introduce a different architect for every project. Yes, Chris?
2 points. One, would be RFP, RFQ. How are we having them bid if there's no project specified?
Yeah, so what they do is they come in, they demonstrate their qualifications, which is really what we're after. We can narrow that down, and we could then have them bid a project. Or sometimes what you do, if there's a bunch of small projects, you get a schedule of values on what they charge for their services. But a lot of it, picking an architect is kind of like picking a doctor. You don't want the cheapest guy, So I think starting off with an RFQ gives us some options, and I think we'll be ahead of the game. And at that point, we can decide if we're going to have them bid a specific job or give a general bid for services.
And then the second question, I noticed that the qualifications, many were based around experience in construction of schools.
Mhm.
And, unknown what the projects are going to be, does that limit our pool of potential architects? Is that something that should be held to the side until we know if that's, if there's going to be any school construction around it?
So they don't have...
I know some
yeah.
firms that actually specifically have a tendency to stay out of projects like that.
Sure. So I think that, number one, they don't have to have school construction, but the ones that do have the most services in-house, and that's what saves us money. My experience has been that when you hire a firm that's smaller, everything has to be subbed out. You're paying a premium for every service. Somewhere along the line, whether it be the structural engineer, the MEP guy, the interior design guy, someone always drops the ball, delays the project. If you get a large enough firm to have those services in-house, you get a much quicker response at a better price. And I think that those firms do work on schools, the larger ones. Do you have a follow-up question?
That was it for me.
Anybody else? Anyone? Okay, so with that, I'm just going to recommend you take this home and you look it over carefully. At the next meeting, we'll review it, make changes, and then I'll ask finance to put it out to bid. If that's the way we want to go. This is a special meeting, so I have no new business. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Have a great night, everyone. Stay warm, and thank you for being here.